The Xiaomi Mi 9 is a charming smartphone. So the Xiaomi Mi line has had some stick in the past for being a little bit derivative. It's not a trendsetter, it just tends to copy what all the big players are doing. We know that Xiaomi can innovate, they demonstrate that with the Bokeh Phone F1, with their Mi Mix series, but the Mi series, their flagships, are somewhat vanilla. And it's true, for sure, this is definitely not a device that is in any way particularly standout, but my question is, does that really matter? If you're getting a really great smartphone with tons of cool features and a great design, does it really matter if it did that stuff first? I'd argue probably not. And in fact, whilst you can hardly call it innovation, the Mi 9 is among the first smartphones to sport the Snapdragon 855, so in that way, it is leading the way this time. And it does have a couple of other tricks up its sleeve, which we'll get to in this review. So starting with the design, the Xiaomi Mi 9 is a really beautiful piece of kit that feels fantastic in the hand. This is a slim, weighty metal frame covered entirely in glass. It has a gorgeous 6.3-inch Amoled screen with an excellent 90.7% screen-to-body ratio. It's only FHD+, that's 2340 by 1080p, rather than a Quad HD like some of the competition, but you'd never notice it to look at it. Like the best Samsung phones, it almost looks like a sticker rather than a screen. And that dewdrop notch is really small and unobtrusive. The screen is also covered in Gorilla Glass 5, and that's good news for me because I keep smashing my devices and getting into trouble. It's great for consuming media, and although it only has one speaker grill down the bottom, it does a perfectly adequate job. The back of the device is a kind of tapered glass affair. Mine is a gunmetal type colour, although Xiaomi calls it black. Now they do also do some other more interesting colours. They have this holographic spectrum which comes in blue and purple and shimmers and catches the light in really cool ways. They also have a transparent version, much like that old Nintendo Game Boy transparent edition. Anyone? But I must say I like my black version actually. It doesn't have that holographic effect, but it's kind of smart and understated and premium. It looks like a little man in a suit. In short, the Xiaomi Mi 9 feels so great to use and looks so great that it actually makes you want to pick it up and start using it. I haven't felt this way about a device since the early days of the Surface Pro, and I'm just going to come out and say it, I like this design more than the Galaxy S10. It's slimmer, it's cooler, it's not as fingerprint prone, so yeah, fantastic job there Xiaomi. And this is why someone would choose the Xiaomi Mi 9 over the inevitable Bokeh Phone F2. But that nice design doesn't come without its compromises. The Xiaomi Mi 9 unfortunately does not have a headphone jack, which I know is going to upset some people. It also doesn't have an SD card slot for expansion, which is a bit of a bummer. The version I've got only has 64 gigabytes of storage, and it only goes up to 128 gigabytes, so you might find yourself filling that up fairly quickly, especially with those 48 megapixel photos and 4K video that you might be grabbing. It does have a dual SIM slot though. And what's also a little lacking is the battery, which is only 3,300 mAh. That might not sound like a lot in a 2019 flagship where a lot of devices these days have 4,000 and above. However, I didn't find it to be a massive problem. I was able to use it fairly normally. That means consuming media, watching videos, playing games, and I'd only have to top up right in the evening, and even then not always. It's obviously not a fantastic battery, but it's also not a problem, or it wasn't for me, and I think that's probably down to the efficiency of the Snapdragon 855. So yeah, whilst it might be nicer to have a bigger battery, I wouldn't let that put you off if you like this device otherwise. And the other good news about the power, of course, is that you get that impressive 20-watt wireless charging. And Xiaomi is selling a bespoke wireless charger that should help you to get the most out of this. It does charge very quickly and it's very convenient to use. I will say though, that I tried putting the Xiaomi Mi 9 on another wireless charger I had, the only other one I had to test it with, and it wouldn't work for some reason. I don't know if that was just them not getting on, or if maybe the camera bump was in the way and that prevented it from sitting in that sweet spot. Something to note. It would be interesting to see if other people have had the same experience. And another more interesting feature that we're seeing a lot more of these days is the embedded fingerprint sensor. This basically allows you to use your fingerprint against the screen. There's a little image of the fingerprint that appears at the bottom to help guide you into the right place, and that'll unlock your phone in much the same way as a traditional fingerprint sensor, meaning that you don't have to have a big chin or a spot on the back to try and grope around to find. And it does work quickly, it does work well. It's not quite as snappy as using a traditional fingerprint sensor, and especially because you're unlikely to find the sweet spot right away and you're probably going to need to move it around a little bit. Luckily, I actually find it quite fun using this. It has a great animation, so that kind of mitigates the fact it's a bit slower. Whether you'll still feel that way after years of using it, who knows? And what's also nice about that fingerprint sensor is that you can use it to activate all kinds of shortcuts. If you hold onto it and then slide your finger into position, then you can pick from a number of apps that you want to launch without having to navigate to them. And what's also convenient and neat is that there is a dedicated assistant button up the top left. That's Google Assistant, no annoying Bixby here. And you can just long hold that to activate Google Assistant. You can also map this to various other actions. For instance, I've got it so that if I double tap it, it launches the torch. However, you can't use it to launch any app you like, which I think is a bit of a weird missed opportunity, but there you go. It's still nice to have an extra button. I'm all about extra buttons. And anyways, I'm sure you can get around that limitation with Tasker and a little bit of imagination. Still, it was just an odd choice. And whilst we're on the subject of neat little software tricks, what can we say about MIUI this time around? Well, this time you're getting MIUI 10.2, that's the latest version, on top of Android 9. And it works really well. MIUI has come along leaps and bounds in my personal opinion. They've scaled back some of the aesthetic decisions. It now looks a little bit less Apple-esque. It's nice and smooth and crisp, everything's kind of minimal, and there's actually quite a few neat features in MIUI. You've got things like gesture navigation, which is enabled by default. This takes a bit of getting used to, but it's a cool way of navigating your device, means you don't have those buttons down the bottom. You have more security when installing new apps. You have a dark mode, which for me these days is pretty much essential. And as always, there's a thriving community around MIUI 9, with users being able to vote on new features they want to see. Remember that Xiaomi began life as a custom ROM designer. And you do get some bloatware, but what's really refreshing is that Xiaomi actually lets you uninstall those apps that you don't want. And the file manager is actually really useful. I don't know why the Mi Video icon is the exact same as the Play Store icon though. That's a bit confusing. But performance is where it is at when you're talking about the Xiaomi Mi 9. And the reason for that, as I alluded to earlier, is because it's sporting the Snapdragon 855 backed up by 6 GB of RAM. Now the Snapdragon 855 isn't anything unique to the Xiaomi Mi 9. It's going to find its way into a ton of devices. Of course, it's going to be in the Galaxy S10 range, but this is one of the first devices to sport it, and yeah, it's really impressive. So anyone who watches my videos regularly knows that my personal benchmark is to see how it handles Dolphin emulation, GameCube emulation. I was really impressed with the Nubia Red Magic Mars recently because it managed to squeeze some pretty decent performance out of the Snapdragon 845 by using cooling and overclocking, but this is a generational upgrade on that, and it really shows. For such a slim device, it doesn't even get hot when you push it. It's incredible. So not only can you play GameCube games silky smooth, I'm talking Metroid Prime, Wind Waker, F-Zero, but you can also play Dolphin games. I was playing Sonic Colors on this. Again, pretty crisp frame rate. I didn't change any of the settings or tweak anything for extra performance. Even plays PPSSPP, that's the PSP emulator. So if you're into emulation, then this is a great option, and the only downside is that lack of storage. Obviously you might not be into emulation, but the fact that it can handle that means it's going to just blow anything else out of the water as well. It can do anything in the Play Store, top settings, no issue. On Antutu it beat 99% of users. Gary's been testing it with the Speed Test G, and it's been blowing everyone away there as well. So yeah, this is a performant phone. And right now this is going to outperform any gaming phone that's available. Of course, there will be many more devices coming out over the next year which will have the same chipset and probably more performance, so you might choose to wait and see. But for now, this is ample power, and I can't really see any reason why anybody's going to need any more. And as you'd expect, this handles the UI extremely smoothly, no glitches, no stutters. And the last piece of the puzzle is that camera, which should also be pretty impressive, clocking in with its combination of a huge 48 megapixel f1.75 primary lens, 12 megapixel telephoto lens, and 16 megapixel ultra wide angle lens. That primary lens is the IMX586 from Sony, and it goes toe to toe with other 40 megapixel plus offerings from the likes of Huawei and Honor. It's not all about pixel count, of course, but the Xiaomi uses tricks like 4-in-1 pixel binning to ensure you get the very most from its shooter. And you can easily switch between pixel counts if you want to keep your file sizes down. And the good news is that this performs exactly as you would hope it would. Photos come out crisp, sharp, detailed, punchy. There's a little bit of oversaturation sometimes, but there's ways you can mitigate that. These are really nice photographs. I was actually really impressed. Low light performance is really good. Not really much to complain about. Actually, one complaint is that Xiaomi sticks that ugly watermark down in the bottom left by default. This is barely even an inconvenience to remove in the settings, but it's just super annoying. Bokeh effects work really well and do a great job of isolating the subject without cutting off ears, Picasso style. And the wide-angle lens is something that's very welcome. With a 117-degree FOV, it's not quite up there with the 123-degree lens on the new Galaxy S10, but it's still plenty wide. And having a zoom lens also comes in handy occasionally for extreme close-ups and snapping things in the distance without losing quality. And just having this combination of features gives you plenty of options for messing around or for trying to get that perfect shot. It's a fun camera to use. Speaking of which, it also has tons of extra features and modes. It has the beauty mode that Xiaomi phones always come with. This one can remodel your face to give you a slimmer nose. Yes, please. There's AI scene recognition, which is practically useless. There's a short video mode, there's a slow-mo mode. Oh, and video is also really good. You can record up to 4K at 30 FPS or 60 FPS if you bring down the resolution a little bit. And according to DxOMark, it's actually apparently the best right now for video. Although it doesn't have optical image stabilization, the digital stabilization is really good here. In general, it's a great all-round camera, whether you're doing video, whether you're doing photos. The selfie camera has a 20 megapixel lens, and that's something I always really like to see, is when manufacturers put some effort into the front-facing camera. Because for some types of people, whether you're a vlogger, for instance, that's actually the camera that you might end up relying on slightly more. So to conclude, I'm a really big fan of the Xiaomi Mi 9. Is it the most exciting phone of the year? Absolutely not. The Samsung Galaxy S10 has far more features. It offers ridiculous things like up to 12 gigabytes of RAM in some cases, and so that's going to grab all the headlines. Likewise, people aren't going to make much fuss about that triple lens camera because Huawei's been doing that since the Huawei P20. It's not the first then, like I said, but Xiaomi's done a fantastic job of picking and choosing features that are really useful and then offering them for a much lower price. The 6GB RAM, 128GB storage model will set you back the equivalent of about $450 US. So unless you absolutely want to have the latest and greatest thing, the foldable Samsung phone, or unless there are features here that you really need, maybe you want the headphone jack, maybe you want more resolution, then this is a hearty recommendation. And if you really want your device to be able to turn heads, then just go with that transparent version. Job done. So if you found this video useful and interesting, guys, let us know in the comments down below what you think of the Xiaomi Mi 9. Head over to AndroidAuthority.com for the full version of this review. Whilst you're there, have a look around, because of course we are your source for all things Android.